Flux LORA and why everybody should be using this to do any of their marketing for a million different reasons. So, Dustin, I will leave this to you and Christine. I'll be a bump on the log.
All right. So one of the things that everybody is enjoying about Magi's newest features is the ability to train an AI image model on your likeness. It's worth saying that this process also works on physical products. So if you have a business that has physical products like toys or uh, apparel, merch, anything that's a physical product, you can actually train this AI model on that physical product and recreate that product in any scene or scenario you want. So imagine doing for yourself, training a model on you and your likeness and doing an entire photo shoot for, whether it's for Instagram posts or whether it's for professional business headshots, or whether you just want a cool profile picture to put across all your social media. The possibilities are really limitless. And for small creators or small businesses that have these physical products, Etsy stores or what have you, imagine being able to do a full professional photo shoot from your keyboard without having to go on location, hire a high-end photographer. You don't have to worry about time of day, lighting, none of that stuff. You just train the AI model on a handful of images and do photo shoots with those trained models. So we're going to walk through that process, what it looks like in Magi. It's fairly straightforward. The hardest part of this, I will argue, is just sourcing the images. So the first step in all of this, if you're going to train a model on yourself, we'll kind of run this tutorial as if you were doing yourself. You're going to train an AI model to generate photos of you. But the principles can apply to subjects of any nature. So you would first want to gather the images of yourself. These need to be images that show your face in many different lighting conditions, in many different angles. You want to have a variety of images to feed the AI model so it gets sort of a full spectrum scope of what you actually look like. The best thing to do is I'm trying to think of the simplest way to articulate this. I can't articulate it better than I already did. Find a variety of photos that show you in every possible angle and different lighting. So once you have those photos, there's a handful of tips to prepare those photos, and I'm going to walk you through it right now. I'll share my screen and show you a folder that I've prepared of trained images. Now, do I want to do the entire screen? That's going to suck for a brief second. It's the best way to do this. What if I share that? How does this look if I just share the file folder? Does that work? Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right, so here I have a folder filled with images, and I've kind of split them up here. We'll just talk about this one. Actually, we'll start with the old format. So let's say this is a folder where I've just gathered all of the best photos of me. And by best, I mean a handful of good ones and a handful of really bad ones. But I wanted to get a variety. Now, unfortunately, I don't take a ton of selfies. And so the variety in this grouping of photos isn't as good as you would want it to be. So if possible, again, as many different angles, as many different settings, as many different lightings as you can possibly get. So you can see I've just got a bunch of different photos here, most of them in my office, which again is not ideal. But you'll see based on what is generated based from these trained images that even if you are bad at taking photos of yourself like I am, you can still get a pretty good result. So I've got all my photos here. Now, the first thing I want you to pay attention to is if there are any images in there that are HEIC format. This is typically a format that comes from iPhones. So if you've taken a lot of iPhone photos, you want to be aware that you want to get rid of these HEIC photos. and you want to convert them to JPEGs. And it's really easy to do. All you have to do is select them if you're on a Mac, right click or command click, and then go down to the quick actions, and you're going to select convert image. When you do that, it's going to ask you if you want to convert them, what format you want to convert them to, select JPEG, and then hit the convert button. You can't see this because it only shared that, but you can see now those same images are now JPEGs, and I can go ahead and delete these HEIC ones. That's really all the prep you need to do. Make sure you get all the best photos you can and get them into one folder. Make sure they're all JPEG or PNG format. Now, the next thing you need to do is you need to compress this folder because the format that we need to put into our AI image trainer is a .zip format. So you see I've already got some down here. And the way that you do this on Mac is, again, right-click on that folder and go down to compress. And when you compress it, it's going to create a .zip file for you. Once you've done that, you're ready to jump into Magi. Am I losing anybody so far?
How would they do this on a PC?
I do not know. I don't have a PC.
They'll have to figure it out for themselves. Okay.
Yeah. If somebody has a PC, I'm sure a lot of people have had to do this for other projects too. So I'm sure it's as easy as I'll right click on a PC, and it might have that same kind of an option there to compress the folder. But again, I don't have any PCs. I can't even test it.
Yeah, that's what I do.
So
it's a couple of clicks.
Jumping into Magi, let's go to our image library where I'm already set up, or rather I'm in the image editor itself. So this is where we generate images, a dedicated space for imagery and videos inside of Magi. Now on the right-hand side, we've got our tools. We are on the Generate tab right now. And on the Generate tab, you go to select your model from this first drop down here. When you click on that, you get a pop-up that shows you all the available models inside of Magi. The one that we're going to look for is called Flux LORA, and I've even made the icon red, so it's really easy to spot. So click on Flux LORA. This is the model that allows us to train a custom style based on our imagery. And for those of you who haven't done this yet, you'll have a button here that says, get some info. I wish I could recreate that right now, but because I've already trained models, it's not going to show it there. But it will guide you through the process. It'll say, click here to start training your LoRa. And when you do that, you'll get a screen that looks like this, LoRa setup. So the setup is quite easy. You've already done the hard work of gathering the images. Now all you need to do is name your LoRa. Now let's take a step back. LoRa is just a fancy word for trained image model. Okay, so whenever we say LoRa, we're not talking about my Aunt Laura. We're talking about a custom trained image model. So you're going to give your LoRa a name so that you can remember. You're probably going to want to create multiple different LoRas, maybe for yourself, for your spouse, for your dog. Who knows? You might want to create different custom image models for different things. So name it appropriately so that you remember what model or what images this is trained on. So I'll just call this Dustin. We'll call it 005. I think this is like my 5th or 6th one that I've trained. And then you're going to want to create a trigger word. Now, what is a trigger word? A trigger word is essentially what you're going to tell the AI, the word that you're going to use for this subject, so that the AI knows what you're talking about. So if I were to just pop Dustin into DALL-E 3, say create a photo of Dustin, DALL-E 3 has no idea who Dustin is. It has probably millions of images of Dustins out there in the world, and it's just going to figure out what does a Dustin look like based on its training data. So this is our way of saying, I'm training you on a subject, and this subject's word that represents it is this. And so in this one, I'll just call it Dustin. And so from here on out, once we train this model, it knows that Dustin means this thing that we're training it on. Did I lose anybody so far?
No, we're good.
Good. Okay. Just making sure. Now, if this was a product, you might want to make your trigger word the name of the product. Or if your product is something that is, maybe very common, like, I don't know, mug. You probably don't want to use a trigger word that is a common word that is used every day. Again, considering that this image model has been trained on billions of parameters, billions of photos that probably include a lot of common words, you want to make sure that your trigger word is at least unique enough to where it's not going to get confused. And so, a name is unique enough in my testing. But again, you don't want to do like mug if you're doing a mug. You would want to do mug 001 or something that makes it unique, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So for us, I'm just training on me. It's going to be my name. Makes it easy for me. Now, the next setting that we're going to toggle here is the create mask. And essentially all this does is it tells the AI, hey, there's a single subject in these photos that I'm going to give you. Make sure you isolate that subject. It's going to create a mask around that person so that it's not taking the rest of the photo into consideration for its training. It's just going to isolate the subject, so it's only training itself on that subject's, in this case, our face. But again, if it was a product, it would isolate that product. It would be able to identify that within the photos. So select that, create a mask every time if you're doing an individual. Now, number of steps. This is a really difficult one to kind of explain, but essentially this means how many passes do you want the AI to go at training on these images to make their model, to create the finalized LoRa. And the best way to explain this is basically if you ramp it all the way up to the end, it's going to make the model so specific that it probably won't follow your prompts. And essentially, it's going to recreate exactly the amalgamation of all these photos in a very specific way, leaving no room for creativity. So the higher you go in number of steps, the less you are able to sort of branch out from the training images. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Now, the lower you go, the more creativity you can have with the subject, but sometimes it may not be quite enough to get the best resemblance. That being said, I have found that 2000 is actually the sweet spot. I've tried it in different steps all the way up. 1000 actually works okay in my experience, but I found 2000 to be a little bit more consistent in creating the best likeness of me in particular. So my recommendation, don't think about it, set it to 2000, you'll be fine.
And this is just, Dustin, for creating yourself. In other words, you're taking your images, 25, 30, 35 images, putting the zip file in, and you can put yourself into any situation, bathing suits, being an ice hockey player, anything that you want. I'd like to come back when we're done with this into the style area where it's actually the opposite, where it's not you as a person, it's the image generating. Let's say for me, it would be t-shirts and hoodies on a model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good distinction. We can go over to what is a style real quick. So a style would be more along the lines of a genre of images. Think, Oz, I know you're a big fan of Tim Burton's style. So if you wanted to train a model that is best at recreating Tim Burton's iconic style, that's when you would click style here and upload a bunch of images of Tim Burton style photos or cinematic scenes or what have you. Or if you wanted to do stained glass imagery, you would upload imagery that is all stained glass, and then you would tell the AI, this is a style, not a subject. there's a difference between an aesthetic and an individual object or person, right? So that's what a style would be. You're training it on a specific aesthetic of imagery rather than a specific subject that you want to be consistent and recreate in different scenes.
I did notice that before you unchecked create mask and checked is style, you can check both of them at the same time. What would that do?
So what it would do in that scenario is it would do a combination of the two. So this typically not what people want to do, because typically when they're training on a subject, they want to put that subject in different scenes. If you were to do both at the same time, now I haven't tested this because I haven't found a practical use case for it, but essentially what it would do is it would factor in your subject, but also the style of photography, the background, and all the elements involved in that imagery. And the results would probably be much more close to recreating the same exact photos that you have in your training.
Well, I know what I'll be doing this weekend.
Got it. Yeah. So I would love to see your results from that because, like I said, I haven't done it myself, haven't tried it. So, okay, we got the name, we got the trigger word, we created a mask, we have 2,000 steps because that seems to be the best. Now, all that's left to do is just to drop in our zip file. So I'm just going to drop it right in here. I've got my old format.zip, and that file is too large. So another thing is that there is a file size limit. I believe it's 30 megabytes. So you may want to run your images through some compression. And I do actually have one here that is under the limit. So I'll upload that one real quick. So it's going to upload this file into Magi's system. And when it is done, it'll let us know and give us the ability to train our LoRa.
That's an important note that it has to be 30 megabytes or less. When you're doing a zip file, though, isn't it compressing it tremendously?
It really depends on your system. So the default Apple system doesn't do a whole lot of compression for the zip file by default. There are apps and programs out there that will add compression to it, but this one in Mac doesn't by default.
Okay.
So we got this one uploaded, and it is worth noting this action does consume 11,000 words from your monthly usage in Magi, because it is a very intensive process and costs us a lot of money to do. But you can hit the Create LoRa button and the app will go to work. Now, I won't do this here because we've already got some that are trained, but it takes roughly about 5 minutes for the model to train. And so when you view it here on the list, you'll see it pop up and it'll say pending. And until it's done pending, you won't be able to use it. But we've got some here that I have already trained. You can see they're completed. And I wrote some notes here for myself in as the name, so I remember what exactly I did. But once you select it from the list, you select whichever train model you want. You'll get your trigger word down at the bottom in case you forget what trigger word you used for it. And then just like any other model, you can start prompting the AI on what it is you want. So we'll say Dustin, actually a photo of Dustin on top of a mountain. And I also, every single time I do this, even though I am pretty good, I would say, at prompt engineering, I always tend to use our enhanced prompt button anyways, because we've done a lot of work to train this AI model on how to fill in the creative details so that it comes out with the best possible prompt for an AI image model. And you can go through the description that it creates or the prompt that it creates and tweak it, modify it to your needs here in I guess a rugged man named Dustin works, standing triumphantly, blah, 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 HDR. Yeah, that all looks good. So I'm going to choose a portrait size here. Yeah, portrait works for me. And now you could just hit the generate button, right? And it'll do a fairly good job. And I'll just go ahead and do that so you can see what the defaults come up with. But we do have some advanced options for generating these kinds of images. And you can see it gave me short hair and I've got my back to it. So it wasn't exactly it. It's not going to come up with a perfect image every time. You know, the AI is still not perfect. So you want to try a couple iterations, maybe change a word here and there. But speaking to these advanced options, there are two options here that most people don't know what they mean. So we'll go over them briefly. Inference steps really, it refers to this idea of how many passes. Again, I like to use that word passes because we kind of tend to understand, you know, how many passes an artist might take at refining their painting. You know, they might do an initial and then go through another pass and refine the details. Or even us writers will do a draft and then we'll go back through and maybe fix some words and we'll go back through, take another pass at refining. So that's kind of how this AI image generators are working. What they're doing is starting with a very fuzzy, blurry image, and it's using all of its processing power to refine and refine and refine and refine that image until it comes up with a final product. So by choosing the amount of inference steps, that refers to how many passes. The more inference steps, the more passes it's going to take to refine those details. The fewer passes it takes, the fewer inference steps, the less passes it's going to take and the less detail it's going to be able to refine. I found that anywhere between 30 and I would say 45 is best. 50 doesn't really seem to make much of a difference. Now, why wouldn't you just want to crank it all the way up? Well, sometimes you'll notice that cranking it all the way up comes out with a less ideal images. Maybe there's too many details, or maybe it messed up some of the details because it was just trying too hard. So you really want to kind of play with it a little bit and see where the sweet spot is for your particular images. I tend to go around 40 or 38. You know, that's around the range that I sit in. Now, prompt guidance. Prompt guidance refers to this idea of how closely do you want the AI to stick to your prompt exclusively. A lower prompt guidance means follow my words, my prompt exactly, do not deviate from it whatsoever. Whereas a higher prompt guidance, if you go all the way up to 20, is like, my prompt is more or less a suggestion, be as creative as you want. Maybe add a bunch of details that I didn't even mention, right? So we're basically telling the AI how closely we want it to stick to our prompt. I found the sweet spot to be between 2 and 5. In all honesty, I usually just go with the default 3.5 because I just don't want to toy with it. Unless I'm really having a hard time generating the exact thing that I want, then I might play with it a little bit. But again, the default 3.5 typically works for most people. So we'll have another pass at it here. We'll take another image of me on a mountain, a rugged man named Dustin standing on a mountain. I guess I could look through our prompt here if it says anything about my back being to the camera. Actually, let's try there we go. Photo of Dustin standing on a mountain facing the camera. And we'll just have it take another chance at that. Windswept hair. I'm kind of curious to see what that comes up with. So let's try that one. See what it comes up with. There we go. Not bad. My hair's a little longer now, but I have had my hair at that length. And so there you have it. So
somebody that knows you, that looks just like you. I mean, that's pretty spot on.
Yeah, and it works fantastic for as long as you've got a good variety of photos, it's going to be pretty good. And you might have a generation here or there that looks really weird. So be prepared for that. But for the most part, it does a great job. And I've been super happy experimenting with it. I've done some really fun photos. And it's been great. It's been great content for my Instagram feed and for my social media profile pictures. So I've really enjoyed it, and I'm getting a lot of good feedback from users who are using it as well.
So Dustin, we can detail, let's say, and because I've seen a lot of the stuff on Magi Masterminds, which is your Facebook page, where you're like, okay, Dustin, a billionaire Dustin in a $10,000 Armani suit at a bar with Magi and glowing letters of the bar. You can basically make the prompt as detailed as you want, and it's still going to pop your face in based on the parameters. Yes?
Yeah, because we've trained it on that subject. As long as that trigger word is in there, it's going to pop that subject wherever you want it and however you want it. So you can see I had some fun this morning with creating some professional wrestler photos. I've got me floating in space, me wearing a suit, me in a t-shirt. Because we're using Flux, it does great with text. So you can have it, create a t-shirt that has your company name on it, or your brand name, or even your name. You can create fantasy art. Again, some of it might be really weird, so be prepared. But it is a lot of fun. You can put yourself on the moon. And here's some of those shots of me in a very expensive suit in a very expensive penthouse suite. But the majority of these photos, they are all with just the prompt engineering was all Magi. I maybe gave it, Dustin dressed in a black tuxedo with a black shirt in a penthouse suite, and then let the prompt engineer really go to town on it. So you don't need to be super good at coming up with AI image prompts. You don't need to have all those descriptive words. You just need to be able to kind of give it a rough idea and then let the prompt enhance go to work.
Very cool. Well, Dustin, thank you. Christine, would you like to say anything?
I love this. I can't wait to play with this. I'm just thinking about all the uses for this, right? You have a lot of influencers that are always looking for new content and photo shoots, right? This could add to a level of creativity for them. You mentioned being able to do the style and products, right? For business owners that own products and are selling products. What a great way to be able to take that product and put it in different scenes. Just think about all the amazing uses for this.
Yeah, I mean, I should show the example that I did. I tested it out on my Xbox controller just to see how it did with if I were to train it. And I think I only had like 6 or 7 photos, maybe 10. Oh, maybe it's not in here. I might have it in my demo. There it is. So yeah, I trained it on just a photo of an Xbox controller. I gave it multiple angles, and then I was able to recreate that Xbox photo in different scenarios. And this is the one that I shared in our mastermind group. And I shared one of the training photos side by side in that same position. This image looked way better than the training image.
It did.
Yeah, the lighting is better. It's just came out super good. And you could see I named it in the prompt. The trigger word I used here is controller red, just to make it unique, like I said, and positioned centrally on a shiny golden pedestal, modern gaming console design, minimalistic background with soft shadows, balanced lighting to highlight the controller's features, high resolution digital art, sleek futuristic style inspired by the concept art of Hideo Kojima. I didn't come up with those words. I gave it a rough idea. Controller red on a golden pedestal, and it did the rest.
Nice. Well, Dustin, this was awesome, and it was pretty simple, so that's really, really cool. Yeah, I know Christine and I, because we have a lot of products in our Etsy store. I am really looking forward to utilizing this, because one thing I've learned about Etsy is if you have very unique images of different people wearing your products versus whatever printer is utilizing, where you can always tell, like people that utilize Printify or some of the others, they have the same model for everybody. All right. So having unique models that we will create, the image of the product and utilizing and playing with it. I will do that this weekend. And I will report to you to see how well everything came out, and Christine as well. So thank you so much. This was awesome. Any brilliant final words from either one of you?
Looking forward to playing with it, right?
Absolutely. And so if you guys are more interested in magi.co is where you want to go. Or you could contact Christine or I, because we have affiliate links that will give you discounts, and we'll put that in the image as well. So thanks, guys, and join us next week. For Dustin and I.